when you consider that during Bjergsen's tenure in Team Solo Mud TSM, they've made all 6 NALCS finals, and won half of those finals. They won 3 titles. This is a team where you would expect them to have had among the best chances to have a deep finish at Worlds. And yet within those 3 seasons of playing for TSM, Bjergsen's never been to the semis of a Worlds. The furthest he's ever been is 1 round of 8 finish. That's it. Otherwise eliminated in the group stage. And I actually think a significant reason as to why TSM has been unable to get those deep, meaningful results at competitions of the level of the World Championships, MSI, etc., is actually because they've always been lacking to some degree in shot calling. And particularly, their limitation has been this over-reliance on Bjergsen to be the shot caller. Now, this is something that was set in place contextually for TSM as a team before Bjergsen arrived. I mean, you can see the influence that they always had from the mid lane position from his predecessor and obviously the owner of Team Solo Mid, Reginald, when he was the player who was the mid laner of the team. And part of that, in terms of that iteration of the lineup, was also so that the team could actually work, so there could be team play, so there wouldn't be conflicts. Because I always said Team Solo Mid back then was Reginald, this aggressive alpha male type figure, and then as a result, to balance out the team, he'd surrounded himself with people who were more quiet or weren't going to directly question his authority. So people like Dyrus and the Odd One aren't going to go to war with Reginald over his calls and what he wants to do with the team. Chaos, in theory, stayed in his own lane, I mean, literally and metaphorically, and would argue to some degree, but had his own role in terms of the pick and ban. And then Xpecial, we all know he's more of a passive-aggressive personality anyway, and as such, it wasn't until later in the team that he voiced his concerns more and would go head-to-head with Reginald in Season 3, and then that actually is something that kind of laid the groundwork for Xpecial to be removed from the team. In fact, everyone who had some kind of disagreement with Reginald on even an in-game level, it seems like they were working out of the lineup, and the ones who stuck around for longer were the ones who didn't speak that way. So that basis has already been there in terms of the team. You look at some of the later players, they're either people who couldn't speak fantastic English or in general were willing to just be within the TSM system and accept this responsibility that, oh, it's actually, we rather accept that the mid laner takes responsibility of being the shot caller. So you look at some of the other players they had after Reginald's time. Okay, so they brought in Lost Boy, a veteran player, a player who has a good understanding of how to play the game, wasn't fluent in English enough to be able to communicate and be the primary shot caller. So there's a position taken up, one of the primary positions, jungle and support, that normally you want to be the shot caller. Then who have they had as their junglers? They've had EU junglers the whole time. They've had Amazing, they've had Santorin, now they've got Svenskeren. In general, these are players who aren't going to be primary shot callers. They're just not going to take up that role, and in general, they're just going to be the jungler. Then, obviously, at AD carry position, after the era of Chaos, during Bjergsen's time, well, they've had Wild Turtle most of the time. Now, Wild Turtle, in terms of the shot calling context, is an idiot. Now, what I mean by that is, whenever you talk about intelligence within the game, not outside of the game, looking at it, analyzing, deciding whether something's the right decision. That's a different thing than being inside the game. That's why I often use the term that I took from actually how people talk about basketball, which is I call it League of Legends IQ. People talk about basketball IQ. So a player like Dennis Rodman, they're not so good at, not very articulate, but inside the game, intuitively, they have a very high understanding of what to do and what their job is within the game. In that sense, Wild Turtle is an idiot. He is not a player who has the capabilities, the faculties to be able to shot call, to be able to make advanced decision making. He shows flaws in his own decision making. So in that sense, he's off lids. He's off the table in terms of being someone who could be a shot caller. So interestingly enough, yeah, it was only really when they brought in Yellow Star, Doublelift, etc. They even had a choice of who else to go to as shot callers. Now, first and foremost, when you talk about Bjergsen, I already think it's a massive flaw to have your primary carry, the superstar player of the team, be, and the primary focus of the team for the enemy team as a result, be the leader, be the shot caller. That already is flawed in my opinion, because for nearly all of their team, except until Doublelift came, Bjergsen was the carry, the star player above and beyond any other players that they had in their lineup. Now, the logic was, initially, this is the logic you saw a bunch of teams messing with in Season 3 and Season 4, that since he's the player who's at the closest position to roam in terms of lanes all around the map, and he works with the jungler, and then eventually when you got to like Season 4, Season 5 meta, you work with the support as well in terms of setting up ganks. He should be a player who therefore would be able to shot call. Look around the world of League of Legends over the last few seasons, and especially right now, and find me a great superstar mid laner who's also a good shot caller. You're going to have a tough time doing it. I mean, Hai has never been a great individual player. He's a great shot caller, never been a great individual player. Some could even say maybe that's why he's such a good shot caller, because he's got more of the overview approach to the game of looking at the whole game like a general rather than focusing on his lane and trying to dominate and take that advantage and spread it to the rest of the map. Dade, famously, the guy who's in Samsung White, Samsung Blue, this is a guy where he was a massive outlier. And even then, as good as he was as a shot caller, first of all, at times he was playing with players like Mata and Dandy, amazing players for comms and understanding of the map. Then later in his career, he was playing with, again, fantastic players in terms of understanding of where to be on the map, Spirit, Acorn, and his special strength as a player was team fights. So he could shot call to some degree up to a certain point in the game. Then on his champions in team fights, he took over in that sense. And a lot of that, you get the sense, was just calling targets. Faker apparently has shot called at times. Like I've heard from reading interviews that the whole thing of Marin being the Season 5 shot caller, and that's why they won Worlds, is apparently nonsense. It was mainly Faker as the shot caller. But even then, Faker has heavily played alongside his junglers in that sense, and that's been a lot of what has built the game. And it doesn't seem like it's really a reasonable thing to say because Faker can do it, someone else can. For a start off, Faker is a massive outlier, as I've always said in my videos, compared to anyone in League of Legends, never mind mid laners. He's almost inhuman in terms of his capabilities as a player. Fnatic, I actually thought were at their worst in terms of like their chances to be the best team when they had Expeke taking on some of their shot calling or overriding Yellow Star's calls. I think that's why when he left and they had the era without Expeke, actually they were a better team overall. And then Alliance was able to be the best in Europe and in some ways mirrored what TSM's done with Bjergsen. They could be the best in their region and dominate their region with Froggen as the shot caller. But you looked at that mid game and Alliance was always very confused as to what to do in the mid lane, even when they had leads, and tried in general to just brute force the game off their individual skill, their mechanical advantages. So I think giving Bjergsen the shot calling role has always put too much pressure on him, and it's always been something where he's been able to individually still play up to his part and be very, very good. But first of all, you can always ask what would have happened if he'd never had to be the shot caller at all and he was just this amazing mid laner. Then you've got to ask yourself, how has his shot calling been damaged by the fact he's such a fantastic individual player? Because it always seemed like there would be games, Season 4, Season 5, Season 6, there would be games where TSM was doing quite well, the lanes were doing quite well, they maybe even got an early advantage at some point, and then somehow the game would be short-circuited due to Bjergsen's call. Like he would make a call and it'd either be like not quite the right call or it'd be a hesitation involved in it, and then the game would just slip away from them and then other factors would lose them the game. But that's where decisive shot calling, that's where knowing what to do could have secured further advantages or outright just led a game down the trajectory to being closed in a neat fashion, where if you could do that domestically, you then might be able to do that internationally and really be able to go head to head with world-class teams who either can match you in terms of laning skill like Royal Never Give Up, or had really good late game shot calling like the guys from Samsung Galaxy obviously showed us at that World Championship. So I always thought, if you look from him joining in Season 4 onwards, Season 4 was when the team pretty much just used to brute force the game for the majority of the time. They used to win by outlaning people and then just team fighting people and having more mechanical skill and being able to brute force fights like that. You look at what they've done when they've had opportunities in TSM to get shot calling presences. So they had Yellow Star. Of course, they immediately started using him. Didn't work out. They had their issues there. In fact, there were even those games where you saw the comms where it sounded like at times Yellow Star and Bjergsen weren't on the same page as to what to do, and Bjergsen might short circuit or override his call. Then you had Doublelift come in. There was a lot of hype around the idea that Doublelift was this great shot caller. He clearly was much improved himself, and he probably did a good job as far as we can tell from the outside. And certainly the bot lane obviously was a massive advantage for them. But I actually get the feeling that in that TSM summer season of Season 6, it was a lot more that when you have Bjergsen and Doublelift in the same team, you are smashing lanes so much, so often, and then being such monsters in team fights, that yes, it's quite logical you are going to end the game early and in the mid game and just outright win off team fights. You're not going to have to be amazing at knowing when to split the map, and then when to split push, and then what objective to take and how to trade for that. It's not going to be as important. Yes, they certainly showed a better understanding of when to take towers, etc., but I don't know if they ever had really good shot calling, because you look at that team, even when they had Doublelift in the team, when people said that Doublelift was this great shot caller, the one thing they struggled with was late game shot calling. You go and look at a few of the games they lost, this certainly was a factor. And actually, this is something where LS was bang on coming into Worlds, that if they had to go to late games against some of the teams in their groups, they would struggle. And that's exactly where they had their issues. Or they just outright didn't even show up in lane and therefore lost in that sense. So that was a massive flaw they had going into that Worlds, and they weren't able to get their win conditions of winning earlier than that. So yeah, good to mid game rather, was fantastic domestically, and still pretty good internationally, except for a few players having some flawed tournaments. So I think this has been a flaw in TSM for a long time now. Mechanical skill can only get you so far, especially when we talk about when you go to the international level. From Season 5 onwards, from my perspective, team play has been really good in TSM, and they've had really good skill, and what they've always been lacking is the strategy, is the great decisive shot calling. Like, mechanical skill was amazing for them in Season 4. They were maybe the best NA team in that sense. Season 5, I think mechanical skill was less because they kept hold of players like Lost Boy, Dyrus. They had Thorin in there, who was never that amazing. He was just decent to actually average by the time the summer came around. But they had really good team play. They had a great synergy that had stuck together for a long time, and the relationships had built up and understanding how to play. Didn't have amazing strategy though, just had decent for the time. As we go on in the game and decision making becomes more and more important, and understanding when to take objectives and how to apply your leads, this is where TSM has shown their biggest flaw and don't seem to have overcome it. Admittedly, their roster's gotten weaker now from bringing Wild Turtle back because they can't Doublelift, but that's only highlighted their flaws. It hasn't created these flaws. The flaws were there all along. Now, I think another flaw for TSM in this particular sense is not just leaving Bjergsen to do this role, but the fact that they haven't properly targeted shot callers in terms of recruitment. Like, if you look at the last couple of seasons, players they should have been writing blank checks for and sending to would be players like Mithy, players like Rainover. These are players who could help you in this instance. I'll give them credit for trying to get Yellow Star. That was a good move, and on paper that certainly should have been the move to fix this problem, even though it ended up not being the case. I actually think this highlights a bigger problem in terms of how teams think about their roster and the trajectory of where that core is going. Because too many teams don't build around the shot caller, don't try and sign a proven shot caller and then build a team around him. What they do is they recruit the shot caller almost last. So they'll go, right, but we have insert player X. We have player X, and he's so good at his role. He's top 5, top 3 at his role. Can't replace him, of course. And then, oh yeah, at this role we have player Y, and he's also, he's like top 5 at his role, and he had a good season. So eventually they have like 2 spots in the whole team that could even be a shot caller. There are so few amazing shot callers in the West, especially we're talking about long term, not just for one split or with one team or in one meta. There are so few amazing shot callers that you've got to go out and get those guys. Then you've got to build a team around them with the good players. Because the difference is you can get other good mid laners, you can get other good top laners, you can get other good junglers, but there's only a handful of these amazing shot callers. That's why I've always thought, I realize in High's case, he couldn't really go to many other teams because he kept constantly saying he wanted to retire. So teams aren't really going to want to invest in you and then complain about having RSI. That's another reason teams aren't going to want to invest in you. But on paper, someone like High, from Season 5 onwards, when Cloud9 started to have trouble, should have been getting blank checks sent to him from teams like, please come, we'll build a team around you, you pick the team. That's how you should be making it. So TSM is still a good team. TSM certainly could still make another final. They could even win NALCS again. The problem is, they are always going to have this problem when they go up to the next level, because when you go to the top level of international play, whatever weaknesses exist become magnified, become emphasized, and those will be the ways in which you lose the game most likely. That's if you can even play up to 11. You don't just outright lose in terms of individual play before you even get to the team aspects. And this has always been a flaw of Bjergsen. It's not this notion that you can just teach someone to be a good shot caller. You can't. That's why someone like Kai can't just pass that on, because it's something about how he's made up and how he thinks about the game. And you can certainly improve shot calling, and that's something Bjergsen and players like Doublelift have done over their career. But can they be the best decisive shot callers? Doesn't seem to be the case so far, and relying on Bjergsen to be the shot caller has been a flaw for TSM for many years now.